All right, good afternoon. Welcome to this week's episode of the Martinez Law Legal Lounge. Happy July 4th weekend. Hopefully you are enjoying a wonderful long holiday weekend with your friends and family. My name is Kristen Martinez. For those of you who are joining us for the first time this week, first of all, if you are new, thank you for joining us. But I'm the owner and founder of Martinez Law. We are a full-service real estate law firm. We handle both transactional and litigation matters, as well as community association law and estate planning as well. So one of my passions and one of my goals in creating the law firm was to create a forum or an opportunity for me to be able to educate the community, and in particular real estate professionals, on different issues that may come up or pitfalls that you may see in your real estate practice, or that your clients may see. And so one way that I'm able to do that is through these weekly Legal Lounge sessions. We are here every single Monday at 12 o'clock on Facebook Live, and I am here to answer your questions live. You can ask me anything. If I know the answer, I will share it with you. But as you go throughout your week, jot those questions down and make sure to attend every Monday. If you are here, you can go ahead and drop those questions into the comments. I will be answering those live for you very shortly. I don't expect a ton of questions today. It is a holiday weekend. Hopefully you're not working very hard at all today. But as we all know, the real estate market doesn't stop or even slow down for holidays. So I wanted to make sure to log on today and make myself available to answer those questions if you have them. A couple of announcements before we get started. If you are joining us this afternoon, please make sure to say hello in the comments down below. On my screen, I cannot see who is viewing and attending unless you comment for me. So I would love to thank you personally and acknowledge you. So make sure to go ahead and say hello in the comments. Also, as you have questions, go ahead and put those into the comments as well. If you were here last week, you know that we've recently brought on a marketing director with the firm. Her name is Alexis. If you've noticed, we've kind of upped our game a little bit on social media in the last couple of months, and that is due in very large part to her. So we are very excited about that, and we will continue bringing you great content. Also, our monthly Get Real with Attorney Martinez event is this Wednesday, July 7th at 10:30 a.m. They're both in-person and Zoom options, so make sure that you let me know if you'd like to attend. I will go ahead and get you that link to register. Finally, we do have another very big announcement that we are excited to share with you. Hi, Neil. Thank you so much for joining and saying hello. We are not ready to share that quite yet. We're probably in the next week or two going to be sharing that exciting news with you. But if you have a guess about what that exciting announcement could be, go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. And again, make sure you stay tuned. We will be probably announcing that in the next week or two. Again, as you are joining us, make sure that you go ahead and say hello to us in the comments, and also make sure to drop any questions that you may have down below in the comments for me. So throughout the week, as I receive questions from you all, I do set them aside and save them specifically for these Legal Lounge episodes. I didn't get any questions last week submitted for purposes of these episodes. So like I said, I do expect this week to be a shorter episode, but I do have a couple of tips to share with you if I don't see any questions popping up in the comments in the next minute or so. So I'll go ahead and officially open it up for questions and answers. Like I said, go ahead and put those questions in the comments. If you don't have a question, make sure just to say hello to us in the comments as well. I would love to acknowledge you and thank you for attending. So not seeing any questions at the moment. With our tropical storm Elsa looming out there, I thought a timely topic to touch on would be casualty loss or catastrophic loss during the pendency of a contract. So what I mean by that is buyer and seller sign a contract. At some point in between the time that they sign that contract and the closing, something happens, a fire, a hurricane, something major, catastrophic happens that severely damages the property. Of course, as soon as you go under contract, you want to get your insurance issues and policies sorted out as quickly as possible. Once there is a storm looming out there, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to bind coverage. So that is one thing that I see delaying things. And while you can be diligent and jump on those insurance issues as soon as you're able to, sometimes there's just nothing we can do to avoid delays in connection with that. But what I do want to touch on today is how does the FAR/BAR contract handle, and I'll specifically be talking about the as-is FAR/BAR contract, handle casualty loss when either a fire or hurricane or something of that nature occurs in between contract signing and closing. And the contract does specifically address this. So the defined term is casualty loss, and that is defined specifically as fire or other casualty where the cost of restoration, according to the contract, we're talking about cost of restoration does not exceed 1.5% of the purchase price. So I'll quickly touch on what happens if it does exceed 1.5% of the purchase price. Let's say it's a total loss, or it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to the property. At that point, the buyer can choose to take a 1.5% of the purchase price credit from the seller and close with the property in its as-is condition, or the buyer can choose to terminate the contract, get all of their deposits back. But in those instances where the damage is within that dollar amount of that 1.5% of the purchase price, the contract provides that the seller, it is the seller's obligation to cover the cost of those renovations. The seller is still the owner of the property until closing. The seller's insurance is the current binding and active policy prior to closing, and the contract puts on the seller an obligation to deliver the property at closing in the same condition it was when the contract was signed. And so if the damages fall within that 1.5% of the purchase price threshold, the burden is on the seller to cover that cost. So the repairs ideally are completed before closing. Seller pays for it up to that threshold amount, no problem. If the repairs cannot be made on or before closing, the seller is required to put 125% of the estimated costs of those repairs into escrow, keeping in mind that that 125% of the estimated costs cannot exceed 1.5% of the purchase price of the contract. If it does, we fall into the provision where the buyer can choose to cancel the contract in that scenario. The seller is never obligated to contribute more than 1.5% of the purchase price for a casualty loss like we're talking about today. So 125% of the estimated repair costs, assuming that amount is less than 1.5% of the purchase price, goes into escrow. Repairs are done after closing. If there's anything left over in that escrow account, it does go back to the seller. So one thing that I would recommend is that if you, April, hello, thank you so much for checking in with us today. If you fall into this scenario, or you find you or your client finds themselves in this scenario, I do recommend that you have an addendum to the contract created, hopefully by an attorney, that deals with some of these issues and details. So the contract clearly lays out for us the financial details. Of course, the parties can agree to more or less if they'd like. But if not, they're in a binding contract for that 1.5% of the purchase price that the seller has to cover. However, the contract does not state, well, how long after closing does the buyer have to have these repairs done? Is it an indefinite period of time? No. But what is that period of time? We don't know. There are details like that that could be tightened up in an addendum that will work to hopefully prevent any future disputes down the road. Let's get everybody on the same page. Once everybody's on the same page, let's reduce that to writing in an addendum, get it signed, and that way there's no question. We're good to go. So that is one thing, given the tropical storm that is floating around out there, that I wanted to go ahead and mention to you today. I know it doesn't come up a lot. But of course, here in Florida, it is very possible. And if it does happen, there's not a lot of time to react. And so you need to know what the contract says. You need to be able to advise your client and point them to the proper provisions in the contract so that they know how these things are handled. And if you're doing deals in the midst of hurricane season, it's probably not a bad idea to mention these things up front to your clients so they know down the road, if this were to come up, here's exactly how it will be handled. So that is my tip for you today. Like I said, I did not get any questions throughout the week to go ahead and address here on today's episode. I know it's a holiday weekend. I hope you are all outside soaking up what sunshine we have left before the bad weather gets to us. If you have any last minute questions, you can go ahead and throw those in the comments for me. I will be happy to answer those as well. Otherwise, we will see you next week, 12 o'clock on Facebook Live. Don't forget to sign up and register for our Get Real with Attorney Martinez event that is happening this Wednesday, July the 7th at 10:30. Thank you. Hi, Joanna. Thank you so much for attending and for commenting. Elvira, thank you so much for attending. I hope you all learned a little something. Like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and leave those for me in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend, and I will see you next Monday.